looking back on it now, it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't as all in. I just didn't have the means as far as I wasn't smart with my diet.
In college, you walked away from wrestling halfway through.
Mm-hmm.
How hard of a decision was that to do?
A lot, because it was the same kind of thing where I'd never quit anything.
Yeah.
You know, I had never not finished it. And I remember it was halfway through the year. We had just went to a tournament up in I can't even remember what, it might have been New Orleans or South Carolina or something like that. We went up to a tournament, Tennessee. It was in Tennessee. And I didn't win a match. We had a dual tournament, so you wrestle a bunch of different teams, and I didn't win a match. And I remember the last match I had, I wrestled this kid and I got cradled real quick, and it was done. And I'm just like, I'm over this. You know what I mean? Like, I was just not in it. And so I sat down, and the coaches were honestly the ones that made it the hardest, where it wasn't something where it was like, hey, I'm done. You know, see, it was like, I had to like sit down with the coaches like several times, and they tried talking me out of it. And I was like, no. And, you know, eventually, like, I just kind of parted ways with it. And then eventually I was going to come back my senior year for it. And I practiced with the team, you know, in between football practices and stuff like that. But I ended up breaking my nose my senior year. Like, it was the day after New Year's. I was wrestling a kid, and we got into a scramble, and I went to go turn around into him, and he swung back and threw his elbow in my face. You know, it wasn't on purpose, but smashed my nose. And I just remember I went like this, and my nose was like under my eye right here, and I was like broke. And my coach was like, just look up. I'm like, broke, and blood started coming down and stuff, and it's still kind of broken. You can still kind of see, because the space we trained at, it was off campus. There was a Muay Thai gym at the same spot, and those guys would break their nose all the time. And you know, however dumb this is, whenever they would break their nose, they would take pliers and they would just pop it right back in. So I was just like, I just remember I went to the bathroom, I saw it, and I was like, I looked like Sloth from the Goonies. Fuck. And I remember I came back out, and I told the coach, I was like, fix it, fix my nose. And so I sat down in the chair, and he cranked on it for a little bit, and you know, we couldn't, he said it as best he could. And then I went to the ER or whatever, and they're like, well, you know, it's not broken so bad that it needs to be fixed. We can either probably fix it, make it a little worse, or not do anything. And I'm just like, because they'd have to break it, set it, and everything else. And I was like, well, this is, you know, not for me. And then I'd have to finish the rest of the season with, you know, face mask and everything else like that. And I didn't want to do that. So it was kind of snake bit from the start, I guess, that senior year. But it worked out, because when that didn't pan out for me, my roommate at the time, he was powerlifting, he was training and stuff like that, and him and I had wrestled from high school. You know what I mean? He's my best friend since like 7th grade, and so we wrestled together all through high school. We wrestled together in college, and then when he kind of burnt out with wrestling, he got in to powerlifting. He was training at the gym that we went to. The other guy, Lance Hickey, that was about an 1,800 pound total at 240. And then Nate McCool, who was, like I said, at the time, the youngest teen ever, he was the strongest teen ever. He had like a 2,100 pound total at 350 pounds, 19 years old. And so he was training with them. So he got in. So I kind of followed him into wrestling. So I followed him into powerlifting. And he eventually kind of transitioned out of it. But then, you know, I caught the iron bug, I guess. Yeah. And then I was
without the perspective you have now, if I was talking to you when you were wrestling at that time and asked you how important and how all into that you were, without the perspective you have now, answering as you were then, what would you say?
I would say it was the most important thing in my life, because I was, you know, similar to what I was telling you yesterday. It's like, you know, I watched film on it all the time. There was, you know, if there was a documentary about wrestling, or if there was, I was all wrestling all the time. I loved watching it. I loved going to practice. I loved just the whole deal of it, you know what I mean? And obviously, like, you know, looking at the level of preparedness I put into powerlifting now compared to then, it's kind of like what you're saying as far as like your level of all in. Like at that point, I had never been more all into anything than I had to that, because it consumed 8 years of my life. But you know, there's, looking back on it now, it wasn't necessarily that I wasn't as all in. I just didn't have the means, as far as I wasn't smart with my diet. I wasn't with recovery. I wasn't smart with all the extra things that I think that, you know, really kind of help progress you as far as, you know, getting the most bang for your buck kind of stuff as far as your performance, but also kind of keep the longevity aspect of it. You know what I mean? If you get banged up in wrestling, you don't know how to sit there and warm up or stretch or anything else like that. Like, you're just going to keep carrying that on and not really addressing that problem, you know?
That's why I put that perspective in there, you know, because as you move through powerlifting, that perspective shifts.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk to some people now, and I've talked about this on the podcast, you know, they'll tell you they're all in, but they're all in as the most all in that they've ever known.
Right. Yeah.
You know, 5 years later, that kind of changes a little bit. But I think you do get to a point where you rise to certain, or you either fall in certain sports or you rise to a certain level in certain sports where you get a way better perspective of what that really means. But then you'll look back on those other sports and be like, okay, same thing. You said it, you were, but you didn't have knowledge, the education to be able to take more advantage of the tools that you had, where a lot of lifters are that way now. You know, they say that they're all in, and here's the cat, they know that there's more knowledge and education out there for them to be able to become better, but they refuse to look at it. Right. Where in some places, and we'll talk about this, in some places I do think there's a time to cut it off, you know, before meet, because you have to take that shit away and just filtering on what you're doing, but then keep a more open perspective. If you like this video and want to see more like it, click here.